Welcome to The Ordinary Effect. I'm your host, Guido Prino. Thank you for joining me. Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. Love to have you around. You know, most people think scams only work on careless people. That's the comforting story that we tell ourselves because it creates distance between us and them. It allows people to believe that there's a certain kind of person who gets fooled and another kind of person who never would. The reality is much more uncomfortable than that because the scams that actually work rarely feel ridiculous in the moment. They feel organized, professional, reasonable. They feel like someone trying to help you during a stressful situation, and that's exactly what makes them dangerous. This particular scam that I'm going to talk about has been circulating for years in different forms. But what makes it so effective is how ordinary it sounds when it begins. There's no prince from another country offering millions of dollars. There's no cartoon villain demanding gift cards in broken English. It usually starts with a simple phone call from someone claiming to be from your bank, from the fraud department of a credit card company like American Express, or sometimes even someone pretending to be law enforcement. And the voice on the other end doesn't sound suspicious. That's the first thing people always say afterwards. They sounded legitimate, calm, clear, confident. The kind of voice you've spent your entire life being conditioned to trust. And almost immediately, they introduce a problem. There's been a suspicious activity on your account. There's concern about fraud. There may have been unauthorized purchases. They tell you they're calling to help, that they're calling to help secure your account before things get worse. What's interesting is how quickly the emotional atmosphere changes the moment someone hears the word fraud. Even if you consider yourself skeptical, even if part of your brain is cautious, another part immediately shifts into protection mode. Your mind stops casually listening to a phone call and starts trying to prevent damage. That's the real beginning of the scam. Not when information is handed over or when the card disappears. The scam truly begins the moment somebody successfully changes your emotional state. Because once fear enters the conversation, even mildly, people start prioritizing speed over clarity. They stop evaluating the entire situation and start focusing on solving the problem as quickly as possible. That's what scammers understand better than most people realize. They aren't just manipulating information. They're manipulating urgency. They know human beings make different decisions when they feel under pressure, especially financial pressure, because money isn't just money. It represents security, our stability, our control. The possibility that someone could access your finances immediately creates emotional vulnerability, whether people want to admit it or not. Now, what makes these scams especially effective is that they don't immediately ask for something outrageous. They build momentum gradually. They may confirm your name or part of your address. Sometimes they already have information leaked from somewhere else, which makes the call feel even more legitimate. Then they start layering instructions into the conversation. Your card may need to be frozen. Your account may need to be secured. An investigation may already be underway. You see, everything sounds procedural, like you're simply participating in a normal security process. Then comes the part. That part that's outside the moment sounds completely absurd. They tell you a courier is going to come collect your card. And somehow, inside the emotional pressure of the situation, that can actually sound reasonable to people. That's the unsettling part. Not because people are unintelligent, but because once the brain accepts the premise that there's an emergency happening, the details start getting interpreted differently. If somebody already believes fraud is actively occurring, then extraordinary measures suddenly feel less extraordinary. A courier no longer sounds bizarre. It sounds efficient, protective, and professional. That's how emotional framing works. Once somebody controls the context, people stop questioning individual details inside of it. And the scammers know this. That's why they keep the conversations moving. They create a sense that things are already in motion. A courier has already been dispatched. Immediate action is required. The account needs to be secured right away. The pressure itself becomes part of the manipulation because urgency is incredibly effective at shutting down reflection. The longer somebody pauses to think, the more likely they are to notice the cracks in the story. So, scammers try to prevent people from pausing at all. Now, what's fascinating is that many people who later become victims often describe having a moment, just a small one, a small moment where something felt slightly off, but they ignored it because the larger emotional situation felt more important. That is an important detail. You see, human instincts often speak quietly. Fear speaks loudly. And when fear becomes dominant, people start doubting themselves instead of doubting the stranger creating the fear in the first place. Now, there's also another layer to this that doesn't get talked about enough, and it has to do with how we're socially conditioned to interact with authority. Now, most people are raised to cooperate with institutions, banks, police, customer service departments, fraud investigators. These are structures we're taught that are there to help. So when someone sounds official, many people feel uncomfortable pushing back too aggressively. They don't want to seem rude. They don't want to create conflict. Scammers understand this better than most people realize. That's why the tone of these calls is so often very controlled. They rarely start aggressively because aggression creates resistance. Instead, they sound reassuring, helpful even. They position themselves as the solution to the fear they just introduced. And psychologically, that creates a very powerful dynamic. Instantly, a very powerful relationship. The same person creating your anxiety is now also presenting themselves as the person capable of resolving it. That combination can override critical thinking surprisingly quickly. And honestly, that's what makes these scams frightening. It's not the technology behind them, not the sophisticated hacking systems. It's human psychology. It's the ability to manipulate emotion in real time. Because people like to imagine they would immediately recognize manipulation if it ever happened to them. But manipulation rarely announces itself honestly. If it did, it wouldn't work. Real manipulation feels like trust, feels like cooperation. It's like doing the responsible thing under pressure. Afterwards, when victims realize what happened, the emotional damage is often much deeper than the financial loss itself. People replay the conversation over and over in their minds. They ask themselves how they missed the warning signs, potentially feel embarrassed and ashamed, even angry at themselves. But that reaction misunderstands the nature of what occurred. This wasn't simply somebody making a foolish decision. It was somebody having their emotional state deliberately engineered by people who understand exactly how fear affects human behavior. And that distinction does matter, because the shame surrounding scams is part of what allows scams to continue evolving. Many victims never talk about what happened publicly because embarrassment isolates people. Isolation protects criminals. The more silence exists around these experiences, the easier it becomes for scammers to keep using the same psychological tactics against new people who believe they're too smart to ever fall for something similar. You see, the truth is, intelligence alone doesn't protect people from emotional manipulation. In some cases, Confidence can even become a vulnerability because people who strongly believe they're immune to scams sometimes lower their guard in situations where they should actually slow down and verify things carefully. Fear and urgency can distort decision-making in almost anyone under the right circumstances. So maybe that's the bigger lesson underneath all of this. Modern life trains people to react quickly to everything. Notifications, emails, messages, alerts. Confirm this, report, respond immediately. Handle this now. There's constant pressure to move faster, decide faster, process information faster. Scammers didn't create that environment. They simply learned how to weaponize it. Because when people are emotionally overloaded and constantly rushed, reflection starts disappearing from everyday life. And reflection is one of the strongest protections human beings have. That's why something as simple as hanging up the phone can completely collapse a scam. The moment somebody disconnects emotionally from the manufactured urgency, clarity often returns almost immediately. Real financial institutions don't punish people for verifying information independently. Legitimate fraud departments expect caution. Scammers depend on uninterrupted momentum. That's an important distinction that people should remember. Real protection never fears verification, but manipulation does. And maybe the most important thing anybody can take away from conversations like this isn't just learning about one specific scam, it's understanding the pattern underneath it. Anything that tries to rush your fear before you've had time to think clearly deserves skepticism. Anything that pressures you to bypass your instincts deserves distance. And any situation where someone is demanding immediate trust while discouraging independent verification should immediately slow you down, not speed you up. Because the ordinary effect is rarely about one giant catastrophic choice. Most life-changing consequences begin with tiny emotional moments people barely notice while they're happening. A moment of panic, a moment of trust, a moment where urgency quietly overrides reflection. That's usually all it takes to redirect a situation completely. But the reverse is also true. Sometimes all it takes to protect yourself is one small interruption, a pause, a decision to hang up and call the number on the back of your card yourself. One moment where you stop long enough for clarity to catch up with emotion. And in a world increasingly designed to make people react instantly to everything around them, maybe that pause is becoming one of the most important skills a person can still have. Thank you for joining me here on The Ordinary Effect. If you enjoyed the show, please consider subscribing. Take care of yourself and see you next time.